Welcome to the Moved to Meditate podcast. I'm your host, Addie D. Hilster. If you're a yoga practitioner or teacher who knows that there's more to yoga than poses, but you're wondering where to find that, come join our quiet little party. Here you'll find resources to help you deepen your practice, as well as insightful conversations with yoga, movement, and meditation teachers from a range of traditions. On this podcast, we spotlight the more contemplative aspects of movement practice. So we talk about all things gentle yoga, meditation, yin, restorative, yoga therapy, mindfulness, and more. Listen in and connect to a community of like-minded practitioners. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm back with the podcast after a little holiday break. And I might be a little late to the New Year's theme, but as I was thinking about what to record today, the theme that came to mind was what I've learned about dealing with challenging times and transitions. Because 2022 was definitely that for me, piled on top of lots of big changes really since the pandemic started. So the topic isn't really New Year's focused only, but it was a good chance to kind of reflect on where I'm at and what I've learned. So I'll talk a little today about my perspective on challenging times and transitions. I have 4 tips for making your way through those times with mindfulness that I'll share here. But before I do that, I have something new to tell you about. If you've been listening to the podcast, you may know that I have an online class library which has a large catalog of mindful movement, yin yoga, and meditation practices. And what's new is that I now have a free tier to the library membership, because I thought in the spirit of a true library, there should be titles you can check out for free. So now each month there will be 5 classes that are available within the free level of the membership. You just sign up for your free library card, and that gives you a login where you can access the free classes. It's easy. The classes in the free tier will be on a rotation, so it'll be a different 5 videos from the catalog each month. You can practice them as many times as you like during the month. There's no limit on that. And you just go to my website, movedtomeditate.yoga/class library, to get the details, sign up for your free library card, and practice with me. And the link, of course, will be in the show notes, so you can find it there. And onto our topic today. Let's talk challenges and transitions. There's been a lot of that going around in the past few years, right? My version of it has been, and this is the short recap, closing my brick and mortar yoga studio due to the pandemic in 2020, moving from California to Washington State in 2021, losing both my grandma and my mom in 2022 and being thrust into intense caregiving and family crisis mode for a while during that process. So that's been a lot of changes on the personal level, some of them good, some of them not so good. Changes to my work, impacts on my finances, having to fly across the country a bunch of times last year, trying to make new friends in a new place during a lingering pandemic, etc., etc., etc. I know a lot of you can relate to this, even if your details are different, right? And as I was kind of reflecting on all of this towards the transition of the new year, like the last week or so, it brought to mind another time in my life that had a similar feel. And there was a story from that time, something that happened to me that I often like to share when I'm teaching about the topic of wise view, which is one of the elements of the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. So I thought I would start by sharing that story with you, like this experience I had, because it's kind of a lesson in perspective. And then we'll go into the 4 tips for change and transitions and challenges from there. So once upon a time, in January of 2017, so about 5 years ago, I went on a yin yoga and meditation retreat that was taught by Sarah Powers and Paul Grilly. And this was an amazing gift I was giving myself at the beginning of that new year. It was pretty rare and special that Sarah and Paul would be teaching together. They're like the major founders of the yin yoga style, people that I admire and love to learn from, and they don't teach together that often. So that was really special. And it was being held at Esalen, which is this unbelievably gorgeous retreat center on the Big Sur coast of California. So it's just like a really special treat to be there. And now, before I go into it any further, you don't have to travel anywhere special or go on retreat to benefit from mindfulness in challenging times. But I had a great story from this experience. I was giving myself the gift of this retreat in part because I really needed to recover from the previous year and to prepare to like move forward with 2017. I needed to like gather some energy for that. Because in 2016, I opened Spiral Path Yoga Center along with my partners, Peggy and John. We were taking over management of an existing yoga center with a great community where both John and I had been teaching. He was a student in one of the teacher training programs that I led there. And we opened under our new banner officially on January 1st. And then tragically, John passed away on January 7th, a week later. It was a huge shock to me and to everyone in our yoga community. So rather than having a grand opening, we found ourselves mourning. The leadership role that we were in as the new owners and as teachers, required us to help our students through this experience. But Peggy and I were also devastated and shaken by it and trying to figure it out and work our way through it. And first years, of course, are hard with any business. Ours was no exception. We had loyal students, but the growth was slow. It was really scary. And we were having to do it without our partner. So practically speaking, it was just like way more work than we had anticipated, way more intense. And by the end of the year, Peggy was totally exhausted and asked to just be a teacher at the studio and not a partner anymore. So then it was just me. So, okay, that is what I was carrying with me to the retreat at Esalen. And the retreat was really beautiful. I think it was 5 days or 7 days. It was something like that. But I got to rest. I got to immerse myself in practice, enjoy the incredible scenery, eat good food. And I started to feel like, hey, maybe I can poke my head out of this hole and look around again, get my bearings and see some possibilities for going forward. And one day on the retreat, at the end of her teaching session, Sarah Powers mentioned to us that there were thousands of monarch butterflies making their annual migration up the coast, and that you could get a great view of them at a certain spot on the Esalen property. I was kind of in a grumpy, tired mood that day. It had been raining a lot. I was just kind of like, But she made it sound amazing. So after lunch, I decided to walk over and check it out. But I got to the spot that Sarah described, and I wasn't seeing anything. It was kind of underwhelming. I was like, is this it? I don't see anything. Why did she send us over here for this? Because I was like seeing maybe one or two butterflies just kind of flit by, and it was like, so what? And then one butterfly flew past me a little closer and kind of in an upward arc in such a way that my eyes followed it and I looked up. Then my jaw dropped. I was standing beneath a huge tree that was covered in thousands of tiny orange butterflies. The tree was absolutely pulsing with the flapping movements of all their little wings. And all I could think was, wow, sometimes you really have to look up. I had to kind of laugh at myself, but it really was a moment of awe and wonder that I almost missed. And then I remembered to look up. This opened my perspective because it was this reminder of wise view, which is a practice of asking yourself, what am I missing? What am I not seeing? Where is my vision kind of distorted? Or how could my view be more whole? And this butterfly experience was totally a metaphor for that moment I was in of digging out of a hard time and beginning to look around for new possibilities again. And I feel quite a bit like that right now, too. So, going into 2023, here are my 4 tips or lessons I've learned about the challenges and transitions and changes. And some of these come straight out of that butterfly story, and others are more like observations, just looking back on my last year. So the first lesson or tip is widen your view. Look up. Especially when you feel fixated or really stuck on something. You might be missing the butterflies. You might be standing under a tree covered with butterflies and not even realize it. And this is both about mental perspective and physiology, your physical body. So I mean literally look up, move your eyes, move your head, look out the window, gaze at the sky, open your peripheral vision. Do you ever notice that when you feel more worried or anxious, that your vision narrows and you kind of don't see like that much out to the sides of you? Check that out. It's definitely an experience that I have. So widening the gaze, looking up. Your body and your senses are supplying the information your brain is using to assess your reality. So give it some different input and you might be surprised how that affects your perspective. Part of mindfulness is recognizing when you're stuck and remembering to invite that perspective shift. The word, in fact, from the Buddhist texts that we translate as mindfulness in English is sati, which in part means to remember. So then the second tip is let there be butterflies. Don't tell the butterflies that they have to wait until everything is worked out before you'll look at them. One thing that I learned a lot about last year was letting the good exist alongside the crappy. The good and the bad coexist. When you have to go through a long phase of uncertainty or loss or difficulty, that really wears you down if it's all you let yourself think about, if it's all you let yourself see. And it is a practice to make space for joy and sweetness and beauty. Like during the pandemic, when lots of people found their new passion for baking or gardening or discovered some cool new hobby or enjoyed more time with their loved ones. Those were wonderful, inspired responses to that dark time. And I think a lot of us felt uplifted by sharing those things and seeing what others were creating, right? This is a practice of letting ourselves be present for the goodness. It's easy to dismiss that part of your experience when you're struggling, but being fully mindful, we can include everything. So make a point of finding your butterflies along the way, no matter what else is going on. My third tip is, whatever you're worrying about, it's going to change. This is the gift of impermanence. Everything changes. Of course, there is loss and impermanence too, because sometimes things change and we don't want them to. Regularly. But the upside is that whatever you're freaking out about today is also in the process of changing already. I had so many opportunities this year to see this happen. It wasn't pleasant, but by the time I worried something into total oblivion, it often shifted into being something different, where my very specific and carefully crafted worry scenarios didn't actually apply anymore. This was especially true with the process of trying to help and plan for my mom's care during her last few months. Things just kept changing and we kept trying to plan, but we kept having to adjust. Worry so often feels like we're doing something to solve a problem or figure it out, which is why it kind of feels addictive, because it kind of feels productive, but it's not. Mostly, it's just anticipation or creating stories out of incomplete information. It just stresses us out, and it doesn't really prepare us to skillfully meet the issue in the actual moment that we need to meet it, when that time comes. So bringing awareness to these mental habits is a mindfulness practice, and it can be quite freeing. Lastly, my fourth tip is to do your practice and know that it will support you. Do your practice. During hard times, I am always so grateful for the years of practice that I have to fall back on. It's all the tools I have. And more than that, it's all the ways that practice has shaped my brain and my nervous system and my worldview to make me more resilient. I'm the beneficiary of having done all that practice. And yeah, many of us do start practices like yoga or meditation out of a challenge or in a moment of life where we're feeling like, well, that's it, I have to do something. And it's totally fine. That's pretty normal to start your practice out of a challenge. And it can be extremely helpful, as a counterpoint and a support during a difficult time, even if your practice is brand new then. But once you've started, don't forget to keep your practice going when things get better. Keep practicing when things are fine and good, because not only will it help you go deeper, it's a lot easier to go deeper when things are fine and good. It will help you be more present to enjoy the good times, but also a big reason is because you'll be developing skills and wisdom that will show up for you big time in the next tough cycle of life. It's like that famous Bruce Lee quote that you've probably heard where he said, "Under duress, we do not rise to our expectations, we fall to the level of our training." The time to raise the level of your training is when things are good. And then it will be there for you to fall back on when you need it. Your practice might look a little different when things are challenging, but it'll still be there for you. Okay, these are my 4 tips or lessons from this year for challenges, for changes, for transitions. It's inspired by how I'm feeling coming out of 2022 and heading into this new year. And I hope that some of these thoughts resonated with you or gave you something to kind of chew on. And I really wish you a happy, peaceful, healthy, wonderful new year to come. As always, feel free to reach out with your comments and insights. You can send me an email. You can find me on my website, DM me on Instagram, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I love all of these. All of the links to contact me or to get your free library card and come practice with me are all in the show notes at movedtomeditate.yoga. I always love to hear from you, and thank you so much for being here. So that's today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with a friend and/or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and help others find us that way. To learn more about my work, the Moved to Meditate class library, live online classes, teacher trainings, and private lessons, go to movedtomeditate.yoga. Thanks so much for listening.